Well, thank you, and welcome to today's media call following this two-day session to discuss liver-induced toxicity from acetaminophen. With me here are 4 officials from FDA and also the chairman of one of the advisory committee panels that discussed this issue over the last 2 days. From left to right, we have Dr. Sharon Hertz. She's the Deputy Director of the Division of Anesthesia, Analgesia, and Rheumatology Products from the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at FDA. Next to her is Dr. Gerald Dalpan, who is the Director of the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology at CDER. Next to him is our chairman of today's two-day hearing, and that's Dr. Lewis Nelson. And Dr. Nelson, you are from? New York University. And next to him is Dr. Sandra Queter. She's the Deputy Director of the Office of New Drugs at CDER. And finally is Dr. Charles Ganley, Director of the Office of Non-Prescription Products at CDER. We have a number of reporters and television cameras in the room here, and we also have reporters on the line. Those reporters who are on the line, I want to remind you that this is a listen-only mode, but if you have some questions to ask FDA and Dr. Nelson, you may email me, Karen Riley, Karen.Riley, R-I-L-E-Y, at fda.hhs.gov, and I would be glad to ask that question. And since this is being transcribed for the public to read, and because we have people on the line, I would ask reporters to please speak up, and for the people here at the panel to please repeat the question. So let's begin. Yes, Matt.
Matt Perrone, AFD. My question's for the chairman, but also the FDA as well. Can you just talk a little bit about how we got here? Because as FDA said on the first day, we've been following this issue for a long time. Held previous panels on this where the maximum dose was confirmed as safe, where combination products were confirmed as an important treatment option, and we heard something very different today. And I'm just wondering, well, what sort of new information or new data arose in the last couple of years that sort of accounts for that?
Yeah, it's Lewis Nelson. The question was, how did we get here? The history has been perhaps that some of these medications have been suggested to be safe and effective, and now we're saying they're not. To be perfectly honest, I don't really want to be responsible for telling you the history of this, and I'm going to let one of the FDA people give you the history. It's probably not really my place to do that.
And that was Dr. Nelson speaking.
Okay, so this is Gerald Dalpan, I'm Director of the Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology. This is clearly an issue that the issue of acetaminophen-induced liver injury that's been on FDA's mind a long time, and if you heard my talk yesterday, giving an overview, it's something that's been an area of active interest with different rules being made for over-the-counter products in the late 90s, an advisory committee in 2002, some suggestions from that advisory committee, namely for an educational campaign which FDA initiated, the results of which didn't really seem to mitigate as much as we like the problem of acetaminophen-induced liver injury. So it's still an issue. There have been other rules for the over-the-counter product put forth. Dr. Ganley and Dr. Queter can talk about them. But in 2007, we looked at the results of the educational campaign, said it wasn't going where we wanted it to go, and we formed an internal group at CDER to examine this issue and put forth some recommendations. And you heard a lot of the options, the recommendations over the course of the 2 days. But one part of that we felt was critical was to have public discussion of it. And so that's how we got here today.
Dr. Queter.
I'd like to follow up that point, Dr. Dalpan's points, with just to say that this is not a problem that really arose overnight. And as you heard, if you've been here for the past 2 days, the The problem, if we can call it one problem, is very complicated. It has multiple components. And there is probably not one thing that will reverse the trend of acetaminophen-related liver toxicity. In addition, all of the components of the problem are moving at the same time. Use patterns are changing. New products were coming and going from the market. Different patterns of prescribing were occurring. And other products are coming and going off the market all at the same time. So there was no, for FDA, there was no one thing that was clear to us needed to happen in order to reverse this trend. And that was why at the end of the day we felt like we had taken some actions. They alone were not likely to be enough, changing the over-the-counter labeling and doing our own public education campaign. And we needed more, and we needed input from a wide variety of experts, including the public, about where to put our resources next to really start to engineer safety into the situation.
Okay, next question. Yes, Gerald.
Sure. Jared Foley with Dow Jones Newswires. Can you explain, I guess, the difference between why the panel recommended against eliminating OTC combination products, but did recommend for eliminating prescription combination products?
That's Lewis Nelson. The question is, why did the panel decide against eliminating over-the-counter products that contain acetaminophen, and were more in favor of eliminating those that contain the opioid combinations, prescription combinations? I don't know that I can give you the exact answer, obviously, but it seems to me that the problems with opioid combinations are clearly more prevalent, both in terms of the opioid component of the product, as well as the acetaminophen component, which is, of course, what we're here to be talking about for the past 2 days. The data that was presented showed that there are many deaths annually in this country from the prescription opioid combination acetaminophen products, whereas the number of deaths that could be clearly related to the over-the-counter products are much more limited. So based largely on that epidemiology, I think it becomes more the bang for the buck that you're going to get from eliminating the latter, the prescription opioid. Now, both of these come with unintended consequences, of course, and that's the hesitation that I think we all had on eliminating either of them, because those are unknown, or at least largely unknown. I mean, you can predict perhaps some of them, but it's not clear what's going to ultimately happen.
And I wouldn't characterize it as the panel didn't recommend it. I think that it was just not quite it wasn't as strong for the OTC products as it was for the prescription products.
Okay, next question, Emily. And please identify yourself.
Emily Walker with MedPage Today. Kind of to follow on that then, how does FDA interpret that 20 to 17 vote that the over-the-counter product should be pulled? What does that mean? Seems like a split, but it's slightly in favor.
No.
17 to 20. Yeah, it was in favor.
10, 10, and 10.
17.
Oh, sorry, I was combining it, yes.
Well, what it says to us is that they're uncertain about there is some uncertainty, and that there are clearly, what you saw today was you saw a variety of experts who come to the table with very different experiences clinically and in their research, and as public health experts, bringing their values to the discussion about how to prioritize potential interventions to address this problem. And I think that this is an area when we start to talk about prescription products, they have very different reasons for favoring or not favoring. They weren't all focused on this. They were looking at the value of ready access, the value of having alternatives available for patients who can't take certain medicines. And I interpret that the differences and the fact that there were, I would say, on most of these issues, mixed votes, reflecting exactly that. What it tells us is that we need to proceed taking into account the variety of potential consequences that might be incurred, and make sure that if they are going to be severe, we're taking that into account and trying to mitigate things that we don't want to happen as a result of any action we take.